The paramedic said my heart stopped for 11 seconds. I didn't know that until 3 days later, when I finally woke up and a nurse named Patricia told me, very gently, that she was afraid the information itself might finish the job. 11 seconds. She said it like it was nothing, like people's hearts stop and start back up all the time and everything's fine. What I remember is the cold floor of the Kroger on Maple Avenue. I remember reaching for a can of diced tomatoes, and then the lights doing something strange, sort of folding in on themselves, and then nothing. Just nothing, the way sleep used to feel when I was young and had nothing to worry about. I was 63 years old. I'd been a little tired lately. My ankles had been swelling. I kept meaning to call Dr. Abramowitz about it and kept putting it off because I hate making a fuss and because I was raised in a house where you pushed through things until you absolutely couldn't anymore. I was raised wrong, apparently. The first voice I heard when I came back was not my son's. It was a young woman asking me if I knew what day it was. I said Thursday, because that's when I always do my grocery shopping, though it turned out to be a Friday. She smiled and wrote something down on a clipboard, and I thought, where's my son? That was my first real thought. Where is he? His name is Nathan. He's 38. He lives 40 minutes away in Glendale, in a house I helped him put the down payment on 6 years ago. $80,000 from the sale of the house I shared with his father for 22 years, the house his father and I bought together, the house where Nathan learned to ride his bike in the driveway, where I used to hang his drawings on the refrigerator, where I sat alone for 2 years after his father passed and slowly packed up a life that had been meant for 2 people. $80,000. I gave it to him without thinking twice, because that's what you do when it's your child and he needs help and you have it to give. I signed the check and he hugged me and said, "Mom, I don't know what I'd do without you." That was 6 years ago. I thought about that hug a lot in those first hours in the hospital. The ICU nurses were kind. One of them, a big, soft-spoken man whose badge said, "Jerome," brought me extra blankets when I said I was cold. He asked me who he should call, and I gave him Nathan's number, his wife Rebecca's number, and my neighbor Sylvia's number, in that order, because Sylvia is 71, and I wasn't sure she should have to deal with this kind of news alone. Jerome tried Nathan first. Of course he did. No answer. He tried again. No answer. He tried Rebecca. No answer. He left voicemails. He sent texts to both numbers explaining what had happened, where I was, and that I would be going into surgery within the next few hours to have a stent placed because there was a significant blockage in one of my coronary arteries that had caused what the cardiologist called a cardiac event, which is a very clean, administrative way of saying my heart gave up on me in the canned vegetable aisle. Surgery. I had surgery and I woke up in a recovery room, and the first face I saw was Jerome's, and he gave me a thumbs up, and I started to cry without entirely knowing why. Maybe just because someone was there. Because there was a face. Nathan still hadn't called back. They moved me to a regular room on the second day. I had a window. I could see a parking lot, and past it, a small strip of sky. I watched the sky and I waited. The nurses checked on me. Jerome's shift ended, and I didn't see him again, but a nurse named Cora took over, and she was just as kind, the kind of professional kindness that is somehow more comforting than anything else, because it doesn't ask for anything back. My daughter-in-law Rebecca called at 2014 in the afternoon on the second day. I know the exact time because I'd been staring at the clock on the wall for about an hour, and when the phone rang, I grabbed it so fast I nearly knocked it off the nightstand. "Oh, Beverly," she said. "That's my name." Beverly. Bev to people who know me well, and Rebecca had always called me Bev, so when she said Beverly, I felt something shift. "Nathan and I just saw the messages," she said. "We've been at this corporate retreat thing in Scottsdale all week, completely off the grid, no phones. They literally collected them at the door. We had no idea." I didn't say anything for a moment. "Are you okay? What happened? How are you feeling?" I told her what happened. "How are you feeling?" I kept my voice very steady. I'd had 2 days to practice being steady, and I was getting good at it. She made all the right sounds. She said, "Oh my God." And that's terrible. And we had no idea we would have been there, you know that, right? And the thing is, I did know that. Part of me did. Rebecca is not a bad person. Nathan is not a bad person. A corporate retreat in Scottsdale with a foam band sounds like exactly the kind of thing Nathan's company would organize, because his company has always valued the appearance of wellness over actual wellness. And Nathan has always gone along with it because Nathan has always gone along with it because Nathan has always gone along with things. But here's the other thing. They hadn't called to check on me in 11 days before this happened. 11 days. Not because anything was wrong between us, just because that's how it had become. Life gets busy. Nathan has his work, and Rebecca has her Pilates and her book club and her volunteer thing at the school. And I have my grocery shopping and my Tuesday lunches with Sylvia, and my beginner watercolor class at the community center. And somehow 11 days had passed without a single call. Before the cardiac event, I'm going to call it that now, because the clinical distance helps, I had been telling myself it was fine, that this was just how adult children were, that I should be grateful he was healthy and busy and doing well. I'd been swallowing that particular feeling for so long, it didn't even feel like swallowing anymore. It just felt like breathing. Rebecca said they would come as soon as the retreat wrapped up, which was the following morning. I said that was fine. I said I was being well taken care of. I said don't rush. I meant all of that sincerely, and I also felt something harden in my chest that had nothing to do with my coronary arteries. The person who did come that same evening, day 2, was my son's neighbor, a woman named Carol. 60-something, grey hair, she doesn't bother to dye. A retired school librarian who had somehow gotten my hospital information from Sylvia, who had gotten it from my contact list, and who drove 45 minutes to show up at my room with a plastic bag containing a crossword puzzle book, a bar of good dark chocolate, and a pair of warm socks with little dogs on them because she said hospital socks are always terrible. I had met Carol maybe 4 or 5 times at Nathan and Rebecca's house over the years. She'd waved to me across the yard. We'd had maybe 20 minutes of real conversation total in the history of our acquaintance. She sat down in the chair next to my bed and said, I wasn't sure if you'd want company, so just say the word and I'll go. I said, please don't go. So she stayed. She stayed for 3 hours. We did the crossword puzzle together. She was better at the geography clues and I was better at the old movies. And she told me about her years as a school librarian, about the kids who had come back to find her as adults, to tell her that a book she'd pressed into their hands had changed something for them. And I told her about my 22 years as a dental hygienist, and how you'd be amazed what people will tell you when they're in the chair with their mouth open, too polite to interrupt, and we laughed, and it was the first time I had laughed since the grocery store floor. When she left, she squeezed my hand and said, I'll come back tomorrow. She did. Nathan and Rebecca arrived the next morning, the 3rd day. They walked in with the energy of people who feel guilty and are trying to compensate through efficiency. Rebecca had brought flowers and a fruit basket. Nathan hugged me for a long time without saying anything, and when he pulled back, his eyes were red. Mom, he said, I'm so sorry. It's okay, I said, and I meant it in the limited way that you mean it when you're saying it mostly to make someone else feel better. We spent about 2 hours together. They asked good questions. They talked to the cardiologist. Rebecca took notes on her phone. Nathan held my hand while the doctor explained what had happened and what would need to happen going forward, the medication, the follow-up appointments, the cardiac rehab program, the dietary changes that the nutritionist would walk me through. It was, by any external measure, a loving and attentive visit. And then Rebecca mentioned that they had a thing that evening, not something optional, she clarified quickly, a commitment they'd had for months, friends visiting from out of town, but they would come back on Saturday, which was 2 days away. You'll be discharged before then, probably, Nathan said. Right? So we can come help you get settled at home. I said yes, that sounded right. They left. Carol came back that afternoon. I've been thinking a lot since then about the difference between people who show up and people who mean to show up. Nathan means to show up. I really believe that. He means to call more, means to visit more, means to be more present, and then life fills in around the meaning like water finding the path of least resistance. And the meaning just sort of sits there, very sincere, not doing much. Carol didn't mean anything. She just showed up. They discharged me on a Thursday, exactly 1 week after I'd reached for that can of diced tomatoes. Nathan and Rebecca were there, as promised. They drove me home, helped me get settled, stocked my refrigerator with things the nutritionist had recommended, and stayed for dinner. It was a good evening. Nathan was attentive and funny in the way he can be when he's paying attention, and I remembered why I love him so fiercely, This person I made. This person who has his father's eyes, and my mother's stubbornness, and some entirely his own quality that I've never quite been able to name. They left around 8. Hugs at the door. Call us if you need anything. I closed the door and stood in my kitchen, and I thought, I need to stop waiting to be needed. That was the thought. Clear as anything. I had built my retirement around the quiet assumption that proximity to Nathan would mean something. That being 40 minutes away was a kind of closeness. I had turned down my college friend Joanne's persistent invitations to move to Asheville, where Joanne had been living for 4 years, in a neighborhood full of people she described as my people. I'd said I needed to be near Nathan. I'd said it so many times, it stopped being a decision and started being just a fact of my life, like the shape of my kitchen or the sound the third stair makes. While I was in the hospital, Joanne had called 4 times. She'd left voice messages, real ones, long rambling ones that sounded like her, like someone who actually wanted to talk to me and not just discharge the obligation of checking in. She'd said she was getting on a plane if I said the word. I'd texted her not to, that I was okay, that I'd explain everything when I was better. After Nathan and Rebecca left, I called Joanne back. We talked for 2 hours. Somewhere in the middle of that conversation, I started to understand that I had organized my life around a relationship that was more symbolic than actual, and that this was no one's fault exactly, and that it had to change. The money was on my mind too, the $80,000 I'd given Nathan for the down payment. I want to be clear that I didn't give it expecting anything in return. That's not why I'm bringing it up. I brought it up because I realized, sitting in my kitchen with its stopped refrigerator and its quiet, that I had told myself for 6 years that I had no savings for a move, no resources for anything different, that I'd given everything away and now I had to stay put and make do. But I had. I'd been careful. I'd kept working 2 extra years past when I planned to because I didn't want to touch my 401k too early. I had savings. I had options. I had been choosing not to see them because seeing them would mean making a decision, and the decision felt like abandonment, like I was leaving Nathan, like I was the one walking away. My heart stopped for 11 seconds in a Kroger, and I decided I wasn't going to pretend anymore. I didn't make any big announcements. I didn't have a dramatic confrontation. That's not who I am. I sat with my cardiologist, and I did my cardiac rehab, and I took my medications, and I had weekly dinners with Sylvia, and I answered Joanne's texts with actual responses instead of the thumbs up emoji I'd been sending for 2 years. Carol and I started taking walks. She lives 4 blocks from Nathan and Rebecca's house, which is 40 minutes from me, which means we had to coordinate. But we coordinated. She had a route she liked that went past a small lake and a bakery she said had the best almond croissants in the county. She was right about the croissants. We walked every other Saturday, and then every Saturday, and then whenever the weather was decent and one of us felt like it. I told Nathan one evening on the phone that I had been thinking about Asheville. I said it carefully, not as a declaration, just as a thing I was thinking about. He was quiet for a moment. Asheville, he said. That's pretty far. It's a 6-hour drive, I said, or an hour and 15 by plane. Yeah, but, he paused. I just thought you wanted to be close to us. I did, I said. I do, but I also want to life, Nathan. That wasn't the whole conversation. There were more words after that, and some of them were hard, and some of them were him understanding things that maybe he hadn't let himself understand before. He is not a bad person. He's a person who loves me in the abstract, the way you love the house you grew up in. It's real, it matters, but you don't go back very often. Toward the end of the conversation, he said, Would you really move? I'm thinking about it seriously, I said. He was quiet again, and then he said, I don't want you to move because of what happened. I'm not moving because of what happened, I said. I'm moving because of who I want to be for the next 20 years. If I'm lucky enough to have 20 years, that silenced him in a different way. A good way, I think. I'm writing this from Joanne's guest room. I've been here for a long weekend, scoping out neighborhoods, meeting her neighbors, walking the trails she's been telling me about for 4 years. The mountains here are not dramatic the way mountains in movies are. They're older, rounder, softer. They look like they've seen things and kept the information to themselves. I found a condo in a neighborhood Joanne calls aggressively friendly, which is her way of saying people actually talk to each other. There's a community garden. There's a Tai Chi class on Sunday mornings that I told Joanne sounded insufferably wholesome. And then I went once, and I went back the following Sunday. Nathan called last week to tell me he and Rebecca are pregnant. 8 weeks. I cried the good kind of tears, the ones that feel like relief. I'm going to be a grandmother. That changes some things and it doesn't change others. A grandmother can live in Asheville. A grandmother can fly to Glendale. A grandmother can be something more than a person waiting 40 minutes away for a call that doesn't always come. I haven't signed anything yet on the condo, but I put in an offer this morning. My heart stopped for 11 seconds, and then it started again. I've decided to take that seriously. Carol texted me yesterday, send me pictures of the mountains, and find out if they have good croissants. I told her I'd already done the croissant research. I told her there was a trail with her name on it. She sent back a thumbs up and then, after a second, a little green heart. 11 seconds. And then you get to decide what comes next. I keep coming back to those 11 seconds. The doctor said that's how long my heart stopped. 11 seconds on a cold grocery store floor with strangers kneeling over me and a can of diced tomatoes somewhere nearby. 11 seconds isn't long, but it was long enough to show me everything I'd been pretending not to see. What I learned about Nathan in those 7 days wasn't really new information. I think I'd known it for years. I just kept filing it away under he's busy, and that's just how things are, and I don't want to make him feel guilty. That's what I told myself. But there's a difference between understanding someone's limitations and arranging your entire life around them. I had done the second thing and called it love. The honest truth about cause and effect, the kind that doesn't need any mystical explanation, just clear eyes, is this: we teach people how to treat us by what we accept. Every time I said it's fine when it wasn't fine, I was training Nathan to believe it was fine. Every time I turned down Joanne's invitations and stayed in my apartment 40 minutes from a son who called once every 11 days, I was choosing smallness and calling it loyalty. That's not a criticism of Nathan, it's a reckoning with myself. Carl didn't owe me anything. We had exchanged maybe 20 minutes of real conversation across 5 years of waving at each other over a fence. But she drove 45 minutes to sit in a hospital chair and do a crossword puzzle with me, and she brought socks with little dogs on them because she noticed that hospital socks are terrible. That kind of attention, the small, specific, unprompted kind, is not an accident. It comes from a person who has trained themselves to see other people. That is a choice Carol makes, probably every day, and it shows in who she is. I want to be that kind of person. I want to earn that kind of person in return. The move to Asheville isn't running away. I've had to remind myself of that more than once. Moving toward the life you actually want, after years of settling for the outline of it, is not abandonment. It takes something, call it clarity, call it the particular stubbornness that comes from surviving something, to look honestly at how you've been living and decide to do differently. I did not have that clarity before the grocery store floor. I do now. Nathan is going to be a father. That still makes me cry a little when I think about it. And he will have to reckon, in his own time, with the kind of parent he wants to be, present or symbolic, attentive or well-meaning. I can't make that choice for him. What I can do is show him by example what it looks like to build a life with intention rather than by default. My offer on the condo was accepted this morning. I called Joanne first. I called Carol second. I texted Nathan third, with a photo of the mountain view from the back window. He sent back a heart emoji, and then, a minute later, "That's a really good view, Mum." It is. It really is.